I think corporate governance is both a necessary evil, if you will, like, especially from a mindset of an entrepreneur or somebody like a, innovator. Oftentimes, governance seems something that is sometimes slows things down, right? But at the same time, I've also seen, in my position as a, director and whatnot, or in general, like as a manager of software teams, right? It is also necessary to make sure that we don't deviate, because these guardrails are put in place for a reason. They may be security oriented, they may be operational oriented, or legal. Many times when you're focused on innovating, you're very hyper focused on one thing, but then and so you're not aware of all the other implications of that move. Like, for example, very recent one, if you was in the news recently, that Samsung encouraged the use of chat gpt, and as a consequence, many of their trade secrets were sort of exposed to the outside world, right? So those things, when I'm sure nobody intended or set out to do that, but apparently, in the course of that, some unintended consequences happened, right? So yeah, I mean, so like, as I said, I'm sorry, there's some messaging going on at work.
Okay.
Okay, all right, no worries. So okay, let's continue. So basically, yeah, as I was saying, I think it is both from a necessary evil is probably what I would classify it as. Like, I can go back to my days at AT&T, where this concept of an entrepreneur in residence or something like that, like, I kind of wanted to carve out that this thing. Obviously, it was not just me alone, but me and along with some colleagues on the business side, we kind of did this together as a exercise where we were trying to prove that, hey, instead of heavy-handed process or heavy sort of teams, we can have smaller agile teams, but with a open mandate, and approach that as with an entrepreneurial mindset, like, hey, go and do whatever it takes to increase the sales of accessories. That was kind of like the mandate, and then use that as the guiding principle, but then innovate around it, right? And that's where, like, things like recommendations, machine learning based recommendations, then automated content creation, or price comparison, like price matching, those kind of things. We sort of created this on our own, just with a small team of people, engineers. We showed that, hey, we can tackle many things and then achieve that, I guess, desired goal, right? Instead of heavy, like, following the regular process of, and I mean, agile was obviously there at that time, but still, um, we kind of took it to that next level where, we showed small agile teams with a broad mandate can achieve great things. And then, we found that that platform then later on grew, to be the standard across the company. So that was some positive learnings from there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, coming back to your question about vision, right? So, or communicating that, I think once you have that goal in mind that is clear, then it becomes easy to you know excite people around that, and let them innovate within that general goal too, as long as you're you know moving towards the right, your this thing is the right, your thoughts are along the right direction, right? You don't have to encumber everybody to just do like a top down thing. You
Yeah.
can let it come up from bottom up as well. I mean, that's a very broad question. I think, obviously, see, Mark Zuckerberg is famously has said, right, move fast and break things, and that worked for him and Facebook in general during their initial growth period and all of that, right? There
Mhm.
was a bit of a, Wild West sort of feel towards that.
Yeah.
But then as the company grew and matured, I think they realized that now with a billion plus users and whatnot, I think you can't operate like that.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know. I mean, I think your question is very broad.
Yeah, bro.
uh, I don't know if I can you know be wise enough to tell you all of that, but I think, you it depends on the phase of the company, the maturity of the company. Like big brands like Toyota, uh, all these established companies,
Mhm.
there is a certain amount of inertia built because they have succeeded in doing these internal combustion engines, right? For example, cars based on IC engines. But and so their success there sort of prevented them from innovating and doing all, basically cannibalizing their own uh, success for electric cars, right? Because every electric car that they're selling is basically taking away from their sales of internal combustion engine cars, right? So that's why you had Tesla and Fiskars and all these companies come and play that lead role right there. So it's kind of like that, right? New companies, or that is why we have these startups, because they are not encumbered by the success of their previous product or whatever, so they can move fast uh, and with little governance, because they are generally creating greenfield things, right? So I think uh, their only operating principle is moving fast, creating things, and putting it out there. I mean, that has been the philosophy of Silicon Valley and startup culture, right? Like, just see what happens, throw things at the wall and see how things work out, and don't think too much about uh, too much in detail about things. Obviously, the idea, there should be some core idea governing that, but yeah. But once you achieve a little bit of scale, automatically you start thinking about, hey, what is this from a legal standpoint? Is this because then you achieved scale, and maybe, I mean, I'm perhaps speaking more of a US centric perspective, but things like, hey, would we get sued? Because once you become successful, people see you as an easy target, so then you have to be cautious about not breaking any rules, laws, whatnot, or against consumer this thing, right? When you have nothing, you can do anything, right? Like, you don't people are not coming after you because they know that you don't have anything. But once you have achieved a little bit of success, then you become easy target. So then you have to get in terms of, like, your hiring practices, make sure that you're not running afoul of all these laws that we have. uh, those kind of things come in picture. So many things, right? So again, like, so scale and governance, I think, kind of go hand in hand. The more bigger you scale up, the higher the governance costs come in play. I think, my philosophy is, you just have to be honest, because see, mistakes can happen at any level. And I think the more honest you are about it, um, the better the outcome is in general. That's my guiding principle, I think.
Mhm.
Right or wrong, it's not always that I'm able to operate like that, because I myself work under some constraints and reporting structure and whatnot. But in general, that is my intrinsic desire. Because you try to cover up, people can smell things, right? They can smell out, hey, this is not correct, or whatever you're saying is bullshit. The people have very good BS detectors. And so the more you try to kind of cover up things, the worse it actually gets up ends up, in my experience. So the honesty is the best policy. So if you screw up, just admit it. Like, okay, hey guys, this is what happened. This is what I'm going to, in the future, I'm going to learn from this and take this corrective action or whatever. And people are generally forgiving because they see you as an honest broker, and they respect the fact that you own up to your mistake. I think that in my mind is way better. And then they actually come and help you because they see that, hey, this guy is genuinely, yeah, first of all, this is a genuine person, and that wins them over. And secondly, they're forgiving and actually willing to help. And I think appealing to that is way better than trying to cover up and appeal to their uh, negative nature. So I think that is my operating principle. So you have so many examples, like back in the 90s, the Pentium chip, there was an error, I think, and Intel, said, "Hey, we are going to replace all the CPUs," right? So that was a huge mistake, but it garnered so much positive publicity for them. I think they were able to recover from it. I think same thing with Steve Jobs. Like, I think I forget what the exact issue was initially when they came out with the iPhones. There was some problem with the antenna or something like that. The exact details elude me, but I remember seeing Steve Jobs. What is it called? A video conference. I mean, like he had a public open this thing, and they admitted, like, this is what we are doing and all of that, right? So it was a both these are examples where big companies admitted that there was a problem, and what corrective action they were taking, and as a result, I think they came out on the positive side, as opposed to things like, you see the Volkswagen scandal about some EPA mileages or something like that. That is like malfeasance, right? Effectively, Enron, all these examples. I mean, I'm not equating Enron with Volkswagen, but I'm saying these are examples on the counter side, like where the companies try to hide and suffer from the negative consequences of that. So yeah, I mean, that's my kind of personal take on things.
Yeah, this is very interesting. What I can listen is you're talking very much about the values, ethics.
Exactly, it's a values. Exactly, ethics and values, right?
Yeah,
That's at the end of the day, that is far more important. I think somewhere I read culture eats strategy for breakfast or something along those lines. So you have to have a culture of doing the right thing and ethics, right? I mean that is far more important.
yeah. So that brings to our very next question, which is design around, in contemporary context. So
Mm-hmm.
we have seen organizations, successful failures, in the past. In contemporary context, especially uh,
Mm-hmm.
corporate wrongdoings,
Mm.
there is a good research on this that it's been getting increased. The ratio is there. So, do you see the need for value-based ethical governance? And if so, why do you think that is important?
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes to what I was saying previously, right? Like I feel like being honest, honesty, and these kind of positive values are key for longevity because people learn to trust your brand more, and then they can go out of their way to they might even pay more because they feel like you're a trusted brand. I mean, Apple is a perfect example, right? Like their security and all that. If you see their ads and all that, they are going against all these advertisement driven revenue based models and saying, hey, no, we are going to not give you that, and we are going to respect our customers privacy more than all of that, and so then they're able to command that much premium for their products.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think the more companies realize that acting ethically, acting in the best interest of the consumer or whatever, right, the better off they are,
Yeah, yeah.
than cutting corners for sure.
Mhm.
I don't know if I answered your question, but I think that's
Yeah, very much. I think you said about the ethics and values, and it is very important with the examples, in fact. And
Mhm.
these are very good examples. And on the contrary, we can see there are many such examples where it's not being practiced. And after a few years or so, we can see it's a
Yeah, I
kind of
mean,
impact
you
of
know, the financial crisis of 2007, 8, whatever,
it.
came about because of essentially malfeasance, right? Like people, banks were being very loose with the, uh, I guess, qualification criteria and all that, and using these low rates to entice people into getting loans that they essentially could not afford
Mhm.
if the interest rates would fluctuate and all that. So, and the world suffered from that, right? I mean, there was a huge impact. People lost their livelihoods and whatnot. So, that is a perfect example of when governance, is absent or not really up to par, and what happens in the long term. Maybe you might see a short term sugar high, a rush of profits and whatnot, but eventually things have a way of bubbling up, and you can't hide forever. So and the longer this goes on, the larger the consequences of that.
Yeah.
And another example, like, it's a perfect this thing, like what is it called, the dangerous slippery road, right? Like I remember back in the early 90s, there was a thing called long-term capital management. There was a hedge fund that had
Mm.
some major losses, but compared to now, it was nothing. But then I remember Clinton and all these, like the government basically came to the rescue, and essentially that is, in my view, that was the stepping stone for all these further things that came on, right? The moral hazard. People realize, hey, the government is going to backstop us, so let's be fancy free. Let's play fast and loose with the money, because the bigger you screw up, the government, will definitely backstop you because of all the intrinsic systemic risk that so is so called purported to be.
Mhm.
And that led to bigger and bigger scandals. If we had bitten the bullet, yeah, maybe we could have seen a short term dip in the stock market, and yeah, but political considerations and all of these always came in play, and then I think we have suffered because of those kind of things. So I think the larger, this thing should be that we should just own up to the result. You can't, you know, privatize all the profits, but public, what is it called? Socialize all the losses. That's that's the principle that came up. And the bigger you screw up, the more, I guess, the government will come to your aid. So all these are like bad principles that we currently seem to have in our society. I think just go with the my principles of honesty and open communications, and don't try to cover up things, like even though it might be expedient to do so at that time, but in the long run it is never a good policy.
Mm.
Unfortunately, and I've personally witnessed things where, despite my own reservations, or maybe I did not make enough noise or whatever, but or it was overruled. There were situations where we should have probably acted one way, but we did not. Things like that, and those are smaller in compared to all the examples I talked about. So it doesn't have as as many big consequences per se,
Yeah.
outside of my this thing. But yeah, I mean, going back to your question, I think the advice would be mainly just to be honest and do the right thing, basically. Yeah, I mean, I know it sounds very trite and formulaic, but that's really all you have to boil it down to, right? It is a big thing, right? Like leaders set the tone because you follow what your you know what your leadership is doing. You follow the this thing. So if they set the bad precedents, then it gives all the more cover for everybody on down to do the same thing or and amplify it. So it's extremely critical for the leaders to set the right tone and operate in a way that is transparent and where people can see, hey, this is how you should operate. And so yes, leaders play a critical role in setting the tone, setting the culture, all of that, right?
Mm.
um, so without a doubt, I think it's the leaders of the company or organization who set the tone and create that atmosphere in
Mm.
which everybody else can operate. Either they can operate fearlessly or with fear, but they see their superiors and they will act accordingly. Also, hiring practice plays a also, so you hire for your culture. You have to hire uh, people who would fit that, because even one person, you hire incorrectly
Mm.
because of their values or whatever, right? It can spoil the whole thing, right?
Mm.
um,